For this Sunday, we are going to hear Boogity 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 one last time. So let's talk about it on this edition of the NASCAR Weekly Podcast.
Green flag, green flag. I'll roll him, I'll roll him. He's flipping me up. Ah! And yeah, boys, how about that? They cut it. Push it in the wall. He drew it off the track. Baby, that's how you do it. Get that second back, son. Yeah, baby, yeah. Oh, yeah.
This is a guest that you guys have been requesting for a very long time. The one and only S1apSh0es. How's it going, man?
It's going pretty good, dude.
All right, and this is your official face reveal, isn't it?
Yeah, just in time for 9,000 subs or something like that. I've been getting so many these last few days, I've just lost count.
Oh yeah, definitely, man. Yeah, definitely. Your channel, I discovered it when you were just around 500 subs, man. It's definitely, it's top notch. I would put your content up there with, let's say, SB Nations, just like, the quality of, of what you do and stuff like that. Like, it's awesome, man.
I appreciate it, dude. They definitely inspired me a lot, and I would always leave comments in all of their videos every time they did a rewinder, or every time like John Boys did like a deep dive or something. I'd be like, "You guys are going to talk about like the Indy 500 or the Daytona 500's coming up. You guys are going to talk about that?" And eventually, I was just like, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to do it myself.
Right on, man.
That's the way to do it.
Right on, for sure, man. And tonight we have some of the usual panel: Eric Estep and the Iceberg. Danny B is at work again, but he'll be back next week for sure. All right, so I emphasized it in the intro. So yeah, this is Darrell Waltrip's final race in the Fox Sports booth at Sonoma. So just feel like just wanted to talk about his legacy and how you guys feel. I know in April there was like a lot of us saying like, yeah, it's time, and while it still is time for him to retire, it's still pretty sad. He's been in the booth since 2001, really a part of a lot of our childhoods in many ways in the sport. Whether it's watching him in the booth or watching some old highlights, he's definitely going to be remembered. So Jared, start us off. How will Darrell Waltrip be remembered? What is his legacy?
I honestly think his legacy is just one I think of being both overappreciated in some ways and underappreciated. Overappreciated by some who are like, oh, this is what it needs. This is how all of it has to be. It's like, no, this is just Darrell Waltrip. Like, only Darrell Waltrip should act like this. But I think underappreciated in the sense that even when you see as a driver, I mean, he was one of the best drivers of the very late 70s and the 80s. And people always remember Cale Yarborough, Bobby Allison, Dale Earnhardt, even Bill Elliott sometimes over him. So I think in that regard, he's very underappreciated for how great of a driver he was. And then I think also as a commentator, he's someone that, we talked about. We grew up watching him, and in that way, some of those antics that might annoy us now kind of drew us into the sport. Boogity, boogity, boogity. I got me excited at 7 years old to watch a race. So I'm definitely going to miss him, but I think like we said in April, it was time. I got to say, and we'll talk about it later, but I'm pretty sure we all got pretty good memories that we can talk about Darrell Waltrip's career, whether it be driving or in the booth or just with fans in general. So I'm going to miss him. It's time, and I'm glad that he'll get a good send-off this weekend.
S1apSh0es?
Yeah, it's as you guys were talking, it's pretty amazing like how much his racing career mirrors his commentating career, because everybody remembers in the early 2000s got like really pumped up. He was a fast talker. He had a lot of great zingers and one-liners and all that. But then through the 90s and his racing career, you're just like, well, man, it's time to hang it up. And then like towards the 2010s started to creep up on us. We're like, you still got that fire in your belly, but it was probably time to hang it up.
Eric?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it kind of echo what Jarrett was saying, especially his legacy is all over the sport, both as a driver and a commentator. I think for a lot of the old school fans, the older generation who's been around a while, watched a lot of different types of NASCAR racing, they remember him as this great, polarizing, but also very talented driver. And then for a lot of people, I think that all of us, we all grew up with, Darrell Waltrip being the voice of NASCAR for half the season every year. And, we have a lot of great memories and fond memories of him doing that. So I just think he's one of those guys where you could say for 50 plus years, he has had a positive impact on NASCAR. There's really very few people out there that you can really say that about. So his legacy is great.
I agree with what you guys are saying. I think, in April, it became an unnecessary controversy whether or not it was his time to leave the booth or not. He's had so many great years. He's done so many great things for the sport. He's been such an iconic personality on and off the track, and a great person as well. From everything I've heard from people, they say he's just an incredible person. I've never heard a bad word about Darrell Waltrip. So I think he deserves a great send-off this weekend. I think he'll get one. I think Fox will go all out for him, and we'll see what happens next with where Fox broadcasts go from here, because one thing's for sure, they won't quite be the same ever again.
Oh yeah, they'll never be the same again. I mean, when you think NASCAR on Fox, the first person I always think of is not necessarily Mike Joy. It's or Larry Mack. It's DW all day. Yeah. Michael with the $1.99 super chat. Thanks, man. Darrell Waltrip is a legend who will be missed. Absolutely, man.
For sure.
And so I guess this is a good send in to the next question. What is your guys' favorite DW moment of all time?
I'll go.
I know if I can go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
The first race I ever went to, I was 5 years old, was the 1995 Winston Select. And him and Dale Earnhardt coming out of turn 4, they didn't give each other any room, and they just slammed each other into the wall, and Jeff Gordon came whizzing by, and that was the first race I ever went to. And I as a 5-year-old, I didn't have much of an opinion on Darrell Waltrip. I hadn't ever watched him win, because that was before my time. But as soon as I saw that go down, I was like, that guy that gave it to Dale Earnhardt, I like him.
Yeah. I was just gonna say really quick. I guess my favorite racing moment, even though I never saw this live, was like the Icky Shuckle, not Shuckle, Shuffle. My bad. I always freaking mess up words on this podcast, man. What else is new? The Icky Shuffle after he won the 1989 Daytona 500. In terms of racing, that was my favorite racing moment from him. In the booth, I'd say, and this is coming from a Junior fan, I'd say when he said, "Oh, he turned it," like I don't know, like that quote from that very moment is always gonna stick out in my mind and stuff. Like it's very iconic. It's very iconic in a sense. Like, oh, he turned him, and stuff. So I don't know. It wasn't a good moment for me as a Junior fan at the time, but it still always sticks out. Jarrett?
I gotta say, my favorite Darrell Waltrip moment actually isn't one that was broadcast with anything. Wasn't a driving moment, wasn't an announcing moment. It was actually in 2010 at Chicagoland. I got to meet Darrell Waltrip in person. And like with many drivers I met, whether it be Jimmy Johnson, Kevin Harvick, Dale Jr., I was nervous. I was really, really nervous. And he was in a hurry, and I ran up. I had this book I would always make with different numbers and pages individually for people, and I had one for Darrell Waltrip with the 11. And I run up to him really quick. He's on his golf cart, and he's like, "Hurry up, buddy! We gotta hurry up. I'm a busy man. I'm working. I'm a working man." And I'm like, "Thank you so much." And he signed it with the 11, a smiley face, and he shook my hand too. And I just thought that was so cool that I was, I think, 13 at the time, and this legend of the sport, this champion, is willing to stop for me, even though he was in a hurry. And I think he ended up, I forgot whether it was trackside or whatever, but he ended up actually being late for the show. And I was just like, hey, I was part of that. But that was just so cool. And it sticks out in my mind of just like the person that he would be, that one person, whether it be me or some other fan, he did care about the fans, and he was genuine towards them. Whether the majority of NASCAR fans are for and against him as a driver and announcer, he was always there for the fans. So that's my favorite Darrell Waltrip moment.
Eric?
Yeah, I can agree there. I mean, just in a nutshell or as a whole, he was always one of the best with the fans as a driver, I think, but most importantly, at least what I saw, in my life, is him as a commentator and off the track and everything. Personally, my favorite broadcasting call is someone who really likes when broadcasters get it right and are able to paint a cool picture and create a cool moment. My favorite personal memory was the 2003 Darlington finish, the way he called it. A lot of times I think we look at like how Mike Joy or Alan Bestwick, the play-by-play guys, how they call a race. Darrell Waltrip's the color commentator. He's supposed to just chime in from time to time with insight on the sport, but he owned that Darlington call. My favorite bit was Larry Mack, I think it was Larry Mack, says, "Oh, those cars are driving terrible." And Darrell Waltrip driver mode
yeah.
kicked in. Nah, they're driving good. They're driving good. And I felt like that's like him coming through as a driver. That's what color commentators are supposed to do, is offer that kind of insight. And of course, all the way to the finish, the Craven got, that was just a great moment. I think honestly, Darrell Waltrip is the reason that finish is replayed
Yeah.
basically weekly. So he's had a lot of
100%. That's what, beyond a shadow of a doubt, in my opinion, his greatest call.
Oh,
yeah, definitely. And I that always stuck out to me because that was right around the time when I was first getting into NASCAR and watching it. They, you think they play that finish a lot now as to hype people up. They played it a lot then, even more probably in the mid 2000s when I was getting into NASCAR. And that always just, I wasn't a Craven fan or a Kurt Busch fan, but I was like, this is fun.
Oh, and I like what you bring up there about, like, he's supposed to be the color guy, but he's coming in more. Something that always set him apart for me from a Dale Jarrett or a Dale Jr. or a Jeff Gordon was that, like, he could actually, like, he would just legit at some point just basically take over for Mike Joy. Like 2005 at Atlanta, he basically just took over for Mike Joy. 2010 at Talladega, he took over as well, and it was really cool to see the chemistry that those guys had, and I think that's also what really helped elevate Darrell Waltrip with the fans too. Is that it wasn't seeming like it was a competition between people. It was just, he knew where he could put something in right. I think Larry McReynolds, he said a story where Darrell Waltrip was ripping on the COT in 2009, just ripping on it. And then at the rain delay in Charlotte that year, they're sitting there and they go to commercial. I guess Mike Helton came up there and basically just scolded him throughout the commercial break. And right before they got back on live, according to Larry Mack, he was looking down like he got in trouble and looked up. Oh, someone needs a hug from DW. And I'm just, I can picture that in my mind. I only have Larry Mack's word to say it, but I can picture Darrell Waltrip saying that. And I think that's something so cool and in a way that he was able to connect the past to the present. And in some ways, I think with that Craven call and with other calls he's had, the future, so it's awesome. The kind of, what would you call it? The perspective and the effect he's had on the sport. He's kind of almost like the John Madden of NASCAR.
He really is. Honestly,
Yeah.
if we're gonna say anyone is, I think it's Darrell Waltrip.
Yeah, depending on who you ask, that's either a good or a bad thing, I guess. Yeah. So some really quick super chats. Thanks, Andy and Evan, for the super chats. One of them saying, S1apSh0es is the greatest YouTuber ever. Yeah, so, yeah.
I'm not going to disagree with him.
Yeah, no arguments there. Looking at the chat, let me pull it up again. Also, Evan Train says, kind and unique. He will be missed either way. Boogity, boogity, boogity. My favorite moment is the same as Eric's. That's good to know. Also, Tom with I don't know what this is. I don't know what currency this is, but it says $2. So,
Euro?
Yeah, or Euro, I guess. Yeah, Euro. Thank you. Thanks, Tom. And his super chat says, his quote when Rusty dumped him is iconic. Oh, yeah. What did he
Hope
say?
he chokes on that 100,000.
Yeah, that's right. He did say that. Yeah, hope he chokes on that 100,000.
Really quick, by the way, while we're shouting y'all out in the chat, everyone watching, there's over 200 watching. Go lick that like button for us.
Yes, go lick the like button. 214 watching, only 64 likes. Make sure to lick the like button. If we can, let's get 100 likes before the first hour, man. We can do it. All right, so next topic is sort of related. Fox has no plans to replace DW in the booth next season. This was according from Adam Stern on Twitter. Now, I feel like we need to pump the brakes on this right now because, I mean, they still have one more race. I'm quite sure that they're probably going to plan something to where maybe a third person comes in. I mean, personally, I think Larry Mack would be the best fit. He's already been there before, and the fans really love him. They really miss him up in the booth with those three guys. And if you're going to replace DW, obviously you can't, nobody's going to ever, replace DW in that sense. But, to get a third guy in there, I think Larry Mack's your guy. But I also saw another interesting thing from Adam Stern. He said that, let's say that, they do want to go stick with two people for next season. The possibility of Kevin Harvick retiring after the 2020 season is very real, and then putting him in the booth. So I don't know. That's an option.
Somebody said that on Twitter that Kevin Harvick's contract runs through 2021, so 2022 would be the earliest.
Yeah, 2022. Excuse me. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So 2022 would be the earliest he would do that after, let's say he supposedly retires then. So Eric, I saw your tweet earlier on Twitter. I know you're not necessarily a big fan of just having two in the booth.
Well, it's not so much just having two in the booth. My problem is I think the weak link at Fox this year, as far as broadcasters is concerned, is Jeff Gordon. I think right now it's Mike Joy. He's a classic. I'm not. I think he's faded a little bit. I think he's lost some of his intensity that I'm still describing in commentary. And I think Darrell Waltrip's still a character. He's like kind of the John Madden. He is the Chris Collinsworth. He is the Tony Romo. He's got something interesting to listen to. Whereas I feel like Jeff Gordon was always kind of the last couple of years has just kind of been awkwardly pasted in there. Jeff Gordon does not say he doesn't offer good insight sometimes, but I just feel like the rhythm is off there. And so putting Mike Joy and Jeff Gordon, if that is what they opt to do for a couple of years here, I just don't think that's going to be a great pair. It's going to be like listening to an ASMR podcast rather than an intense NASCAR race. Because they're both, both talk about like this volume. Jeff Gordon, even when he's excited, wow, look at them slam. Look at them slam out there. Like,
Did you see that? And all that.
I'm not a huge fan of them opting to go with a Mike Joy, Jeff Gordon booth. My biggest fear though is that they replace Darrell Waltrip. This isn't my biggest fear. That's an over exaggeration. But one possibility that I'm not sure I would love either is putting Michael Waltrip in Darrell Waltrip's place. I don't know if that's great. Larry Mack would be awesome, but I've heard Larry Mack from what it sounds like. He's older. He likes the fact that he's able to stay in Charlotte and just work race hub and kind of call in, from the Charlotte area. He doesn't want to travel all for half the year. But yeah, that's my biggest problem. Is I just don't. If they go with a 2-person booth, it'll be Jeff Gordon, it'll be Mike Joy, and I don't love that combination. Maybe they'll prove me wrong. Maybe with Darrell Waltrip kind of out of the way, Jeff Gordon can really shine. Maybe he'll come into his own. The idea of Kevin Harvick joining the booth, I'm not a big fan of Kevin Harvick as a driver. I think as a commentator, he would be really good. I'd love to see them bring Carl Edwards out of that field he's lost in and put him in that booth, but that's not going to happen. So I don't know. And I think you're right, Darian. It's a little early to jump on this because I think they want to wait for Sonoma. They don't want to talk about Darrell Waltrip's replacement before he's actually gone. That's not classy. So I agree. I think this is something I don't think they made any final decisions for next year. I think they'll still weigh their options. A 2-person booth wouldn't be the worst thing, but it just wouldn't be my first choice. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I mean the whole just thinking about the possibility of having Michael Waltrip in the booth. I don't know, like Michael Waltrip. He's I really like him as a Truck Series commentator and also as a Xfinity commentator. As far as Cup, I'm not really sure. I sort of like him in his little role he's already in right now. So, Jarrett, go ahead.
For me, I'm kind of torn on it. I do like the traditional 3-man layout, but at the same time, Fox does need to change something up. I think we've all been agreeing that at least in the last year, I think more people might say even more than the last year, they have been pretty stale. I think that's one of the biggest reasons why NBC got so much praise last year is after a few stale years, they started changing stuff up. I'd be down with the 2-commentator setup just as long as it's the right people. I do think also though, Jeff Gordon, in my opinion, like I think that having DW there has been to his detriment because I don't know about you guys, and maybe this is just me seeing this, but I kind of saw that DW and Jeff Gordon sometimes talking about certain topics. There seemed to be tension. There seemed to be that generational gap, whereas Jeff Gordon, very recently raced these cars, and Darrell Waltrip is about 20 years removed from competition in that regard. So I think that maybe Jeff Gordon can start to sort of blossom into a better commentator. He definitely has been the weak link at Fox, in my opinion, over the last few, especially this year, but probably last year too, which is surprising because I liked him so much that first year that he was announcing. I could see them maybe switching commentators each few weeks. Maybe they could do something like that. I know that, we don't like to think about it, but Mike Joy is getting a bit older, so he's probably going to need some sort of break in the coming years. And maybe, and he might retire. Yeah, so you could have Alan Bestwick and
what's Wally Dallenbach up to these days?
He's signed on Fox. He's signed on Fox. He does Race Hub.
Oh, I haven't seen him in Race Hub in a while though.
Yeah, I haven't paid too much attention to Race Hub.
He might still be there. I don't know.
But, maybe, Alan Bestwick and Wally Dallenbach. I know that there was that rumor floating around over the offseason that Joe Buck might have done some select NASCAR races. I wouldn't want that, but you know what? If it switches it up and maybe he can be better, what am I saying? It's Joe Buck. But it could work. They could have rotating ones like NBC does, just as long as they're not copying what everybody else is doing, trying something new. I am down to try something, and if it doesn't work, go to something else. I don't think they should set themselves in a box moving forward. I think that this should be their sort of rebirth as NASCAR broadcasters.
Right. So really quick, just want to read off some super chats. Matthew, thank you for the $2, buddy. Eric, thanks for getting my name right in your vids.
You're welcome, Matthew.
I don't know what his last name is though. I'm not saying that.
It's tricky.
It's some Greek stuff, man. I can't pronounce that.
I cannot pronounce that. And also, Evan Tripp with another $2. Thanks, man. He says, Slap used to announce at Greenville Perkins Speedway. Is that true?
Yeah, Greenville Pickens Speedway. That's my buddy Evan. We worked down there. He was the lead videographer, and I would do videography work, and I would do announcing when they had the guy who normally does announcing. He worked with Michelin, and so he was always like on again, off again. So I'd fill in for him.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Wait. Let's have you fill in for DW then.
Yeah.
I'll do it. I'll quit my job right now.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Slap. What are your thoughts?
I don't know, because when I was announcing, I was told to put more emphasis on different things and do this and do that, and I never really got the feel for it. That's why I was the replacement guy, not the go-to guy. I think you got to have three people in the booth. I think with just two guys, it gets a little bit too samey hearing the same two guys go talk with each other. Like when Rick Allen and Phil Parsons used to do truck races, it was just the two of them. That's kind of fine because the races are shorter. But with those long 500-mile, 600-mile races, listening to the same two guys up there, I think you got to have three people.
Yeah, I was just about to point out, having two commentators in the booth is nothing new to NASCAR. The first CBS broadcast for the Daytona 500 only had two. For a while in the 80s, when ESPN first got the NASCAR contract, they only had two for a little bit there. We haven't seen anything like that in a while and stuff, but again, nothing new to NASCAR. So we'll see how it's received. None of you biz with $5. Thanks, man. His super chat says, "Let's get Ricky Craven in that booth." I don't know, maybe.
Fox did just get him, just sign him. You never know.
Yeah. I've seen him as an analyst. I haven't seen him. I don't think he's ever been a commentator before, so that'd be interesting. And also Colton Kennedy III with 99 cents. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. All right, so moving on, still on the topic of Darrell Waltrip. So it was announced that two schemes were announced today, and another scheme was announced earlier in the week in honor of Darrell Waltrip. I just want to ask the panel really quick: have you guys had a chance to see any of these schemes yet that some of these Cup drivers are running?
I saw Stenhouse's leaked scheme when it was getting put into the hauler. I haven't seen. I think David Regan had one that they were going to reveal here soon. I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah, they revealed
I saw
that
those too.
And also Matt DiBenedetto, his was just revealed on today's Race Hub. I think it's a throwback to Darrell Waltrip's first start car in the Cup Series.
Oh, and that Mercury Terminal Transport, yeah. Number 95, yeah.
Yeah. So they're gonna run that. Honestly, the best one to me is the Stenhouse one, just by far. I don't know, when I was first getting into the sport, when I thought of Darrell Waltrip, I didn't really think of his championship days or his championship cars that he ran, the Budweiser car, the Mountain Dew, the Gatorade ones. I always thought of that 17 that he used to operate himself. Right before.
Western Auto Parts.
Yeah, the Western Auto Parts one. I still have the little diecast at my mom's house somewhere and stuff. So still hanging around there. So definitely a very iconic scheme. I'd probably have to say that's the best one.
I like the looks of that one. I'm biased when I think 17. I think Matt Kenseth. But when I look at the 17 on Stenhouse's car, the font, it actually looks kind of close, I would say, to Darrell Waltrip's old 17 look. Yeah. Not really, but it's closer than this is. I'd say. So I do like the scheme on that one. But I also like on David Reagan's. Theirs is a little more on the nose. They got Darrell Waltrip's big old face on the hood. They have thanks W on the side. I don't know if this might have just been an unsponsored week and it timed out well for them. I don't know, but they went really all out with the DW stuff.
I wish nothing but the best for that 17 team since they're running that scheme. As long as it doesn't have Fastenal on it. Then,
yeah, I think it does.
Yeah. Oh, it does. Does it?
I think it does on the side.
Ooh. Okay. You know what? I'll let him off the hook this week. It's on the side.
Oh, great. He'll finish 18th instead of 30th.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the curse is lifted for just this one race, though, just because I have a big heart. That's all. All right. Even though there was a bye week for the Cup Series, we still had some action, a ton of action this weekend at Iowa Speedway. The trucks took the track. I don't know if any of you guys had a chance to watch the race. Just wanted to do a really quick race review on that. Eric, did you get a chance to watch it? Or?
I did watch the truck race. I didn't get to watch much of the Xfinity race, but
Okay, yeah. So what were your thoughts on the truck race?
yeah, well, the big stories coming out from the truck race is early on it was Chandler Smith dominated in that 51 truck.
He's the real deal. I keep telling
16.
you.
I mean, we'd all heard of him. We knew he was good. This is his first truck start, and I was like, oh gosh. And I felt bad for Todd Gilliland and Harrison Burton because I'm like, oh, he's out here dominating at 16, and they're running like 7th. That's like, oh, that's tough. But ultimately he faded at the end of the race. He had a penalty as well. He sped on pit road, so he hurt himself. I think he still finished 9th. So that was one big story. The other two probably bigger stories though were Ross Chastain sweeping the stages and then winning the race with ease, but then failing post-race inspection. They appealed it, and we found out today that it was upheld. So he had to vacate the win. He still isn't locked into the playoffs. He got last place points, lost the bonus money and all that stuff. So really bad week again for Ross Chastain. But then the other big story was the Austin Hill versus Johnny Sauter, which we can talk about. I guess
we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a little bit.
Are we going to start with Ross Chastain?
Yeah. I was just about to do that. So yeah. So Ross Chastain ended up winning the race. Was a feel-good story. Oh, he's gonna make the playoffs. There we go.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, the world came crashing down on him.
The crushing blow.
Yeah, the crushing blow of NASCAR came right on top of him. Because the truck did not pass inspection, so unfortunately the win was vacated and given to Brett Moffitt. And I'm just thinking, Ross Chastain has to be the most unluckiest driver in all of NASCAR in recent memory.
The way I think of him in a way, and I think at some point Carnation needs to make this a meme, is he's the guy who gets his heart taken out in the Temple of Doom, except it happens over and over and over and over again.
Every single time. Just when you think he's making, progress, he's, taking 2 steps forward. He's always taking like 1,000 steps back.
It's a nightmare inception. That's what it is. It's a nightmare inception of the Temple of Doom over and over again.
And what's crazy
it's terrible.
What's crazy is it's just so unlucky. This is the first season that NASCAR is implementing these rules for post race winners inspection, and then Ross Chastain just happens to be the very first guy that they're gonna make that gets the book thrown at him. So that's unfortunate there. And now the point situation for him is because after he won, he has to get inside the top 20 now. And he was only 14 points outside of the top 20. Now it's like with the penalty, it's like he didn't even race. So now he's 69 points back. I'm not sure whether to say nice or just feel bad. So in that sense. but Jarrett, start us off here. Because I was looking on social media. And some people were very upset with NASCAR about this, but I don't know. You tell me. I think NASCAR made the right call here. I props to them for sticking to their rules here.
I tried at first to just stay as neutral and out of it as possible, and just sort of think about it. It's like because this always gets me thinking is when they pass the inspections over the weekend beforehand. And then suddenly after the race, after they pass the pre-race inspection, they don't pass post-race. And it always makes, I'm like, that's weird. But I don't think that there's really any vendetta against him like some fans may think. I just think that I'm glad NASCAR stayed consistent with what they set out to do before the season, especially since that they had to be like, oh crap, like this is gonna be a terrible announcement after how much popularity he has garnered over the last year. I'm happy in the sense that they stayed consistent. Now, if they can continue to stay consistent, and if somebody appeals and wins, they give an adequate reasoning to why it was overturned, then good. But for now, that's about all I can really say. It sucks because I really wanted Chastain to win. I really like Ross Chastain, but at the same time, you got to stick within the rule books you set out. That's something that NASCAR has always struggled with. And when we talk about the other stuff with Sauter, we can get into that more. It's, let's hope that this is just the start of staying consistent, even though we probably won't like it. Thank God it wasn't that like the win was taken away from Chase Elliott and then it was given to Kyle Busch, because Lord have mercy on anybody who tried to defend that. Like, at least this one is like a lighter version, it's not something that big.
Also wanted to point out really quick, the appeal was denied today, so the win's not going to count for him. Really quick, JC1424 with the $5 super chat. Thanks, man. He says, I don't have a problem with Johnny Sauter wrecking Austin Hill or getting suspended for it. LMAO. We'll get to that in a moment here. But S1apSh0es, what are your thoughts, man?
Jared hit on it a little bit, but I wish it would fix this pre-race inspection. Like, how does a guy go through pre-race inspection and you don't catch that? Because I think it was Bob Pockris on Twitter said the ride height up front wasn't even close. Like, it was way under. And so, like, how do you not catch that during pre-race inspection? And if they say, well, it passed pre-race inspection and we did look at the ride height up front, well, how did they change it and why did they not change it back? On the last stint.
I've never understood NASCAR's whole procedure with pre-race inspections ever, because then you go into post-race and then sometimes teams get dabbed for stuff that should have been caught pre-race, right?
Well, I've seen in the past, and it's been more prevalent in the Cup Series, where teams have been caught intentionally manufacturing parts to break during the race and break in their favor. Say something in the front end, I don't know how it works exactly, something that holds the splitter up a little bit. Maybe they intentionally push the limits, and you can manufacture a part that's intentionally fragile, where you push it through pre-race, it works fine, breaks in the middle of the race, and now your car's nice and low, how it works. I know that is an issue that they've had in the past. It's one of the harder penalties, harder things to spot, harder things to police. But I haven't seen it in a while, and you don't see it in the Cup Series as much because the ride height rule is no longer really an issue there. It's only an issue in the trucks and Xfinity. So that's what I think ultimately this happened in this case. I don't think it was an intentional bit of malice. I don't think it was Nice Motorsports trying to break the rules. They might have been trying to skirt the edge because there's a lot of pressure on them right now to run really well and win a race there in the next couple months. So it wouldn't surprise me if they were pushing the edge with some part and it broke or went slightly over the limit and they didn't expect it to, and it ended up biting them. Now, I did see today they were a little worried since their appeal failed and everything. They're now kind of worried, like, well, shoot, we still don't know exactly what we did wrong, so it's going to be tricky going forward to make sure that doesn't happen again, because and then that's what has me concerned, is if they don't know what broke this time, I don't know if they're going to know what breaks the next time they win a race. So that is concerning to me. I think that's what the ultimate issue was. It was a part breaking mid race. Now, they did try to say it was due to contact. That was the point of their appeal. They said during the race we ran into someone, or they ran it out, or something happened, and that's what caused it. Maybe that is the case, and NASCAR just still said no, that's not a good reason enough for us to pass you. I don't know on that. I don't know on that front. I will say I give NASCAR tons of props, because disqualifying Chastain they knew was not going to be a popular move. But they stuck to their guns. Fans asked for this in the offseason. They asked for NASCAR to take away wins. And any fan who's criticizing the rule now, I think, especially if you didn't criticize it last year, or especially if you're pro this format, you have no right to complain now. Yeah. Obviously, if you're a Ross Chastain fan, it's disappointing and you hate that happened to your guy. But it's also, Nice Motorsports is a smaller team. They're outperforming what they should be running. And I think sometimes, you'll see mistakes like this, that a big team who has more resilient parts probably isn't going to make this mistake or isn't going to have this issue. It's the negative of being a smaller team.
And I'm also looking in chat. Oak32 Assassin says, apparently Chastain had a broken shock mount. And I mean, could that have had any effect towards the?
I'm not a mechanic. Is that during the race? Because that's the type of thing that I think they'd want to fix during the race.
Yeah,
that's that. If it was a broken shock mount, I mean, that's what killed Neil Bonnet. I mean, that's pretty. That's a serious part.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be winning the race by 4 seconds with a broken shock mount.
Yeah.
No.
So I don't know. Something was broken, obviously. That's why they didn't pass the post-race inspection there. But just want to throw this stat out here. I tweeted this out on Monday. So Brett Moffitt is the first winner to not lead a lap since 1953 at Martinsville, when Lee Petty was handed the win after Herb Thomas's dominating performance. Apparently, from what I could find from that race, it was it turned out to be some huge scoring error, but I mean, it's still very confusing because Herb Thomas, he won, he finished second. He led 127 laps of the 200 that day, and then Lee Petty wins, doesn't lead a single lap, and I'm like, wait, what? I don't know.
Well, yeah,
chaotic neutral reigns supreme, man.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you could say that with this one, it could be the first, I think someone said since 1950 that it can be like verifiably proven that any NASCAR series had a winner with that led 0 laps. Because with that one, there's so much back then. There's so much like gray area to what people had. I mean, there were some races where it was like, oh, we sort of, we weren't watching. That car's leading now, I guess, right? Sure.
Wendell Scott.
I don't think that one was by accident, but
Yeah.
but so I guess in the modern era, you could say this is the first one ever in the modern era, which is kind of crazy to think about.
And
I mean, it was possible before if like the red flag came out and then the race was called before, I guess maybe, but I think they go past the start finish line, so that wouldn't have mattered either way. But it's kind of crazy just throwing that stat, and people are just not even going to notice that, I guess.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy how they used to run races back in the day. Like if you go on racingreference.info or .com, so many of those races, they just have the finishing order, and they'll say 1 lap led by so-and-so because he was the winner, and they don't have any other stats on anything else. They didn't keep track of anything.
Yeah, and I don't know. Let me get your guys' opinion on this. I don't know. Like, I still don't necessarily know how to feel about the situation. Like, I understand Chastain's team cheated, whether it was on purpose or not, we'll never know. But like, I don't know, just handing the win to someone who didn't cross the line first. I don't know. Like, I mean, probably the reason I'm like this is because growing up watching NASCAR, I'm so used to, okay, well, the team was caught cheating, they keep the win, but they get a huge points deduction, and like someone gets fined or suspended for the races and stuff. So like maybe it's because NASCAR is sort of transitioning into this way. But I don't know, like how do you guys feel about that? Are you guys like cool with this rule still being a thing, or?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I mean, people have won races in weirder ways. I mean, if Michael Waltrip was running around in Nashville in like 6th or 5th, and everybody in front of him wrecked, and he won. So, I mean, sometimes crazy stuff happens, and you just win by accident, kind of. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of the beast. Yeah. And it's not your fault that the guy in front of you cheated and you were running second from lap 1 to lap 200, and well, congratulations, here's your trophy.
Right.
I mean, it's not your fault.
Yeah, I just can't imagine me like just imagine how Brett Moffitt was feeling. Oh, I'm about to leave the track, good points day, and then official comes up, no, you won the race, bro. Like, you got to take these pictures, you got to do interviews and stuff. Like,
did he even do that though? That's the thing, is did he actually stay around to take pictures or anything? Because I don't.
Yeah,
I think he did. I think he was on Twitter
in the garage area, and he also had to do post-race interviews.
See, I'm just imagining that if somebody was like how young Kyle Busch used to be, where if he didn't win the race, he would just like immediately leave the track. He's like halfway to North Carolina on a plane. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, Kyle, you actually did win. So can I get an apology for how you treated me driving there?
Yeah.
No? Okay, yeah, cool, man. No, but I don't have a problem with the rule right now. There's no reason that, at least with this instance, that I've seen for there to be a problem. I think the only people that really have a problem with it are the people that wanted Chastain to have the win, which, it's tough. I wanted Chastain to have the win. I'm not gonna lie. I'm biased towards him there. Yeah, but there's no real smoking gun, I guess, to say with any problem with it right now. If something comes up, then I'll criticize it. But right now, I don't see anything really to criticize.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's just a personal preference. It is weird, the fact that you see all the celebrations. We see Chastain with the watermelon burnouts, all that type of stuff. You see the celebration, and then 2 hours later you find out that none of that mattered, and that everything you watched there was
a lie.
It will be forgotten. It is a lie. Yeah, that is weird. But I think it's ultimately when you look at the history books, when you look at the stat sheet and everything, I think it's correct. I think I still like the fact that they give second place the win and just bump everyone up. I think that still feels right. Personally, it's just weird with the eyes watching it. It feels weird now to go back, because I'm looking up photos and stuff from my show this week, and I'm typing up Ross Chastain, Iowa, and all I'm seeing is him winning, and I'm like, he didn't win. None of this matters anymore. It's like looking into the Twilight Zone. So that's a little weird, but I know it doesn't happen. It'll happen a couple times a year, probably across all the series, not just in one series. Probably it'll happen a couple times a year, and people will just learn to live with it, I think.
So basically, he smashed a perfectly good watermelon for no reason.
Well, I mean, yeah.
There's starving kids all over the world, man.
Oh man.
There's still good pieces. It's like, no, there's still some good pieces there, and you can kind of cut around that.
Yeah. So really quick, we have 251 watching and only 133 likes. Make sure to click the like button. Let's get to 200 likes before the top of the hour. And so staying on topic with the Truck Series, or in this case, let me refer to it as the Clown Series for a brief moment here. So we had some controversy during the race. To give some context to the situation, the previous race at Texas, Sauter-Hill got a little loose, got into Johnny Sauter. Johnny Sauter ended up wrecking and destroying and basically ruined his night at Texas. And then going into this race, the same exact thing happened coming out of the same exact turn 4. And unfortunately, Johnny Sauter got loose again. He spun out, hit the wall. But then on the caution laps, he wasn't having it. He drove right up to Sauter-Hill's truck and ended up basically wrecking him, and in a wreck that seemed like forever. Johnny Sauter has really always been a hothead to me. Just going back to his days in the NASCAR Busch Series, like in the early 2000s, he's always been kind of a hothead. This situation, though, I don't know. I know some people were comparing it to Kyle Busch's situation. I don't know. To me, it's not that. It's not really comparable. Even though the situation might be the same, the outcomes and the context behind it is not comparable. And I'll get to that in a moment here. But it was announced earlier this week that Johnny Sauter will be suspended for one race, but he's still championship eligible. And I've seen some videos and some tweets with differing opinions on that. So let me ask your guys' opinion. Eric, was NASCAR in the right, or should there have not been any sort of penalty?
No, I think NASCAR in this case got it right 100%. I think a one race suspension is in line with most of their past incidents in this case. It's consistent with how they've interpreted this rule more often than not in the past. So I think a one race suspension is fair because you can't wreck a guy under caution. I understand Hill kind of got into him last week and then got into him again this week. And, I can understand. Let me put it this way. I completely understand Johnny Sauter being angry in the moment. Yeah, he's a little bit of a hothead, but I sided with him. I think he should have been angry in this case. But NASCAR has made it clear in the past, intentionally wrecking, especially under caution. They're not a big fan of that. They don't like that personally. I do think it's good that they did not take away his playoff eligibility in this case. He still gets to use the win from earlier this year to lock himself into the playoffs. He just misses out on a chance to earn more playoff points at Gateway and all that. So ultimately, I think they got it right. But I do understand why Johnny Sauter was angry. I think Sauter-Hill was, as far as the on the track under green flag racing circumstances, yes, Sauter-Hill I would say was mostly in the wrong more often than not. But Johnny Sauter, you can't wreck a guy under caution when you've got potential safety vehicles around. Other cars are clumped together because they're going slow. It's under caution. That's just they made it clear in 2011 that any sort of wrecking under caution was going to be met with harsh penalties.
And the reason I say that is because the reason I was calling it this is the Clown Series right here, because that is some local short track BS. That's something you see on the local short track circuit. You don't see anything like that in NASCAR, or at least you shouldn't. You should. I think I always look at these drivers as a higher standard to younger drivers in the ranks and stuff to set a good example. And in this case, it was just very clownish and foolish. Jarrett, go ahead.
My take on it kind of is similar to a lot of people, where it's like I don't agree with doing stuff under caution, just for the fact that if something is to go wrong under caution, I mean, this is an extreme case to look at, but something going wrong, or you're in the wrong spot during a caution, you can hurt somebody else, and that's something bad. You don't want to hurt somebody that's just a safety worker. You have issues like there's the whole thing about getting out of the car and when you can and can't with cautions because of what happened with Tony Stewart and Kevin Ward. So I think that doing something like that under caution should be met with a suspension. I do also understand people criticizing that, though, because you look at what NASCAR has in the past done. They suspended Kyle Busch. Now, I get that was a different situation and all, but I personally don't think when it comes to crashing somebody under caution, whether it's at 30 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour, or, just as it gets under there and it's 180, not cool. Should be met with a suspension. But you look at the history NASCAR's had, and I can understand people ripping on it just for the fact that Matt Kenseth was suspended multiple races for crashing Joey Logano under green. Kyle Busch was suspended. Johnny Sauter suspended. But then you look and Jeff Gordon wasn't suspended. Now, granted, that was a few years ago. Stuff can change since then. Maybe the Kenseth incident was sort of their setting a precedent. But as long as they keep precedent with it, I'm kind of cool with it. I don't really have too strong of an opinion either way. I can understand people wanting Hill suspended too, but NASCAR made the decision, go for it. I personally, I think that it's fine that Sauter did. I wouldn't suspend Hill, but that's just me. So.
Yeah, and I mean, shout out to Austin Hill though. He was still able to come back after from all of those circumstances and still put together a 13th place finish. So wasn't bad. Wasn't a bad day overall for him. S1apSh0es.
If you wreck a guy under green, I don't think that's. I think that's just boys have at it. But if you take out somebody else who wasn't a part of that whole thing, then that's maybe you fine or penalize or some way. But sitting a guy out for a race for wrecking a guy under yellow, like Eric said, that's the precedence. Is you get to stay at home for a week. There's safety workers out there. There's jet dryers and all this other stuff going on. And, sometimes even when nobody's doing anything ignorant, still somebody hits the back of an ambulance by accident. So we don't need to increase our odds of having something bad happen even more by just letting a guy who's a hothead go out and wreck somebody. Like if Johnny Sauter had just waited and just gone out there and just waited for Austin Hill to get by him and wrecked him under green or something, I'm like, hey, put him under probation, say, don't do that again, cool your jets, you got your revenge, everything's taken care of,
He wouldn't have gotten suspended.
Yeah, he wouldn't have gotten suspended, everything would have been fine, and everybody's like freaking out about him not getting his playoff eligibility taken away or anything, but I think the stipulation that you have to run all of the races, I think is just kind of
that's
dumb.
That's not really a
because they waive it so often, it doesn't matter anymore anyway. Like Kyle Busch got hurt at Daytona and missed all those races, and then came back and won the championship. Like that shouldn't have happened, but that was what NASCAR decided to do. So
yeah, there's so many examples, like even little ones, like Kyle Larson in I think it was 2015. Yeah, like while Kyle Busch was out, Kyle Larson got sick and he couldn't run Martinsville, but they were like, oh no, you're still good. And then Tony Stewart in 2016, his final year, got hurt before the season even started, and then they waived that off and stuff. So yeah, like it's a rule, but I don't know why, because NASCAR,
they waive it so often, it shouldn't be a rule. They should just get rid of that rule.
Yeah, they never seem to use it ever. I want to ask the panel this though. So like I just said, I don't think the comparisons. I don't think the Johnny Sauter and Kyle Busch 2011 incidents are comparable, and the reason I say that. I saw a lot of people comparing it on Twitter. The reason I say that is because, well, number one, Kyle Busch wasn't running for points. Number two, that was a championship situation. Austin Hill, in this case, is already locked in, so he's not really affected in any sort of way. And number three, I can't think of a third one. Those are the only two.
Well, man, they parked Kyle Busch for the Cup race the next day, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So he was running in a lower division, decided to have it Ron Hornaday, I think it was, and parked him for the Cup race, and that when I think he was in the chase that year, and I think that effectively ruined his chase hopes that year.
Well, I mean
he was running pretty far back. He didn't really have a realistic shot, but he was still mathematically in it until they decided to axe him for that one race.
Right. So I just want to ask you guys: are the two situations comparable here, or am I just nuts?
I think they are. I mean, it doesn't matter what division if you come through, or whether you're bushwhacker or not. If you decide to have at a guy under yellow, I mean, you get the same penalty as if you were running in that series full time.
The way I kind of see it with it is, if somebody gets hurt, does it matter if they're running for the championship or not? Like, does it matter to the injury that they get if they're running or not? I think it is comparable in that regard, that if you get hurt under caution, that's that's the risk that you put people at. And if somebody else gets hurt that's not even involved, like a safety worker or another driver, do they care if it was a championship deal? No, it's
Yeah.
I think it's very comparable in that regard.
I mean, I think Kyle Busch's was more extreme in that they were
Yes.
going at high speeds, and
Way
he
more.
was not a playoff driver impacting a playoff driver. So Kyle Busch was definitely more extreme. But on the surface, I think NASCAR, they're referring to the same part of the rule book probably for both incidents. But yeah, I don't know. I still think the penalty on Sauter was fair enough.
Now, another thing I saw is people debating who was in the wrong. I saw some videos and some tweets saying, well, it was Austin Hill's fault. Why isn't he suspended? And then I've seen some other ones saying, oh, it's Johnny Sauter's. So whose fault was it?
As far as the on-track during green flag racing stuff, I mean, yeah, Hill got into him at Texas, and then, Sauter got into Hill a little bit at Iowa, but he didn't warrant Hill basically cleaning Sauter out. So Hill was completely wrong and deserved to be retaliated against in some sense, a bump and a spin, or obviously, Sauter was taken out of that race, a fight. I mean, anything. Sauter deserved to be, or was allowed to be hot at Hill after that incident. I'm not a big fan of penalties like that for, in competition. They were battling for position. They'd kind of gone back and forth. I'm not a big fan of penalizing someone for that unless it's Talladega and you run a guy, unless you're Tony Stewart in 2006 at the Daytona 500 and you run a guy at 200 miles an hour completely off the track going into turn 3 in front of traffic. That warrants a penalty or could warrant a penalty in my opinion.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I don't think a spin like that, just an over-aggressive bump and run at Iowa warrants a penalty, but I can understand Hill was in the wrong. Like I said, Sauter had every right to be angry with him. It's just the way he went about it. NASCAR's made it clear in the past you can't do that.
I'd agree with that. I'd say Hill is at fault. I think it's the problem isn't that there was a response. It's just how the response was given. Like, again, if it had been under green, or even just racing for position, I can understand there being a lot more leeway. But it's just how this all went down and not why it went down, I guess.
Yeah, it's all a matter of execution.
Alrighty. Another super chat from Carl Singleton with $2. Thanks, man. Mid-season Cup title picks. You know what, man? Let's. That's a fun little one. Let's do it right now. It's close to halfway in the 2019 season. Eric, who's your title pick so far?
For the Truck Series?
Or no, for the Cup Series.
Oh, for the Cup Series right now? At this point, I'd go with Kyle Busch. Or, yeah, probably Busch.
Jarrett?
Yeah, I'd say also Kyle Busch. Though I would not be surprised if the closer turns it on at the end of the year. Kevin Harvick definitely has become a top tier driver, and I'm not gonna put it past him until he's out of it. It's not over to the fat ladies things.
Slap?
I'm going to pick a dark horse, a real dark horse, Kurt Busch. I think he's going to punch his ticket here at Sonoma, and I think he's going to turn the Jets on and win one for Ganassi.
Oh man, you're not supposed to give up your race picks now.
I'm sorry, man. I'm new to this. I'm new to this whole thing.
That's all good, man. That's all good. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go with Kyle Busch right now. It's definitely a easily top 3 driver in the sport right now, and currently second in the standings, I believe. So he's in striking distance for sure. So we're almost atop of the first hour. We have 244 people watching and only 160 likes. We only have 7 minutes to try and get up to 200 likes before the top of the hour. So let's do it. So moving on, the Xfinity Series also raced. Christopher Bell pretty much dominated, stole the show. We also saw some typical performances from Cole Custer, as well as Tyler Reddick, putting up some good runs in that race. Noah Gregson's coming on as of late. Noah Gregson, to me, deserves the driver of that race. He was running inside the top 10, inside the top 5 even. He had some problems. He was at one point 1 lap or 1 to 2 laps down, and came back on that final restart, was on the lead lap, and ended up getting a top 10. So he's definitely turned it on in the past few weeks here. I think his average finish the past 3 races is now somewhere in like maybe the 6s to the 6s, 7s, somewhere inside the top 10, of course. So he's definitely putting it on for sure. But back to Christopher Bell. So last week, in an interview, he had said he really doesn't know where he's going to be in for the 2020 season. He wants to be in Cup, obviously. I think this entire panel agrees that he is Cup Series ready. So Eric, I'll start with you. Let's just have fun with this. Let's make some predictions here. where does Christopher Bell end up in 2020, in your opinion?
Well, the full quote from last week was he doesn't know where he's racing, but he said I've been told that I have a ride. That's what he said, which makes it sound like Joe Gibbs has come to him and said, hey, we want you in our cars. Obviously, that doesn't mean he's going to have a cup ride anywhere, and that makes me think the Levine family racing option is the most likely, because we've heard from Eric Jones recently that they're close to signing an extension. Truex is there, Busch has signed an extension, Hamlin's got FedEx, so he ain't going anywhere yet. So Levine's probably the best bet for him in the Cup Series side of things. If we want to have fun with it, Stewart-Haas, I saw a video, I think it was him on Michael Waltrip's podcast the other day, said when he was naming his 3 favorite drivers, he named Tony Stewart as one of his favorite drivers growing up. So Christopher Bell to SHR, we'll get those rumors flowing.
So I wish that because I think Levine, they had said earlier this week that the possibility of a second car is a lot lower now, just from stuff coming up. Personally, I think he's going to have another year in the Xfinity Series, and I think that Eric Jones is going to get sort of that last prove it year with Gibbs. Like, I don't think he's done bad by any means, but I think that Bell is going to be, they've proven that they can keep a full year of sponsorship together for the most part with Bell, and I think that gives them a little more time to make that decision with him. Personally, I want to see him in Cup. I'd be fine seeing him in SHR car, see what he can do. Suarez has been pretty good this year, all things considered, in SHR. He's not Kurt Busch by any means, obviously, but that team can elevate a driver, and I would love to see what an elevated Christopher Bell would be able to do.
Slap.
Going to Stewart-Haas, it sounds like a definite possibility. I mean, we know Tony Stewart and Joe Gibbs have pretty good chemistry together. I'm sure they get along. So I'm pretty sure he'd do the favor of them, like, hey, I'll put Christopher Bell through here for a year or two until a slot opens up, or Matt DiBenedetto getting outed at Levine Family Racing. I don't know what his contract situation is, or if he's just on a 1-year deal this year, or what else is going on. But he might just stick it out in the Xfinity Series for another year. Who knows?
Yeah,
I mean, everything seems like equally possible at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely like to see him over at Stewart-Haas. I know, it's the last year in Clint Boyer's contract. Also, there's some, rumors that, Eric Almirola, his sponsorship deal with Smithfield might be up. Personally, I think, they're just going to re-up another deal because, they've been with him for so long. And Daniel Suarez only signed a 1-year deal, I believe, as well. But Suarez is he's definitely performing up to par this season for that team, for the 41 team. So I wouldn't even consider it an option there. But I don't know. Stewart-Haas might be an option there in the 14, not the 41, the 14. So I know some people in the chat were saying drop DiBenedetto and he'll go run with Levine. I mean, Levine Family Racing, just one of the most overrated teams so far this season. Everyone was saying in the preseason, DiBenedetto is going to make the playoffs. He's going to make the playoffs. He's nowhere near the playoffs at all. And maybe it's indicative of some argue it's the equipment. Some are arguing, it's just him. So I don't know. Maybe put Christopher Bell in the car, and we'll find out. So we'll see. Or they just start a second team with them.
I think Levine. I think Christopher Bell. I think I said this last week. I think a couple of us kind of said this last week. I think Christopher Bell's too good for Levine Family Racing. Yeah. I agree. Levine's disappointed a little bit. I think a lot of us, or at least I thought they'd be maybe a 20th place team this year with the Toyota help. Instead, they've been like a 25th place team, which is still better than last year, but not by as much as I thought they'd be. So I think Christopher Bell's better than that. Maybe he could help them out. I actually think he could help them out. I think given where they are, he's one of the few young drivers out there that I think could go to that team and actually improve. I mean, I think there's plenty of young drivers that could go to Levine and help them out, but my point is, young drivers go to Hendrick. It's not going to help them as much as a young driver with as much talent as Christopher Bell would help a team like Levine Family Racing. So maybe that works out. There'd have to be a behind-the-scenes handshake agreement that he'd be in better equipment at some point, because I just don't see Christopher Bell. Christopher Bell might choose to race another year in Xfinity if the only other option was Levine.
I don't think he doesn't want to do that though. Like he's already proven his worth. I mean, he should have been in the Cup Series this year to be honest with you. Like, you know,
Given how other people have
last
rides,
year, 7 races last year, and he's not in the Cup Series yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not really sure about that. But I don't know. I for his sake, hope he doesn't have to do one more year in Xfinity, and he can go on to a successful Cup team. What's the saying? I want to see him thrive, not survive. Like, you know, thrive with a good team, like, you know, Joe Gibbs or Sauter-Hill Racing, or I don't know. This is a long shot, but imagine him in a Penske car. That'd be pretty awesome. And you know, not just you know, hanging on over at Levine Family Racing.
Well,
So
it's like kind of like Rusty says in the chat. What if NASCAR ditches that 4-car rule? You know,
yeah.
they. I personally, I think that nowadays that rule is so dumb to have.
Mm-hmm.
You know, nowadays in NASCAR, if a team has the sponsorship and the ability to have a 5th car, let them. So if Gibbs, you know, were to come forward and say that, I would be completely fine getting rid of that rule. In this instance, it's just, you know, at the same time though, there'd be so much drama and stuff with that. I don't think so. So
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll have to wait and see on that. I guess what we can talk about, since we're on the topic of Xfinity, some other prospects in the field, and we can even go down to trucks and even K&N as well. I mean, this weekend at Iowa, we saw some potential prospects for the Cup Series in the future. I want to talk about Chandler Smith. That is a kid I've been talking about since last season. He has been winning ARCA race after ARCA race since last season, making his debut. I don't know, like, what are your guys' thoughts on him, man? I know he's only 16, he still has time to develop, but I mean, is he in the plans for Kyle Busch Motorsports as far as a full-time driver?
I think he very well could be. I think he's going to be in a lot of teams' plans as a full-time driver in the Trucks or Xfinity Series going forward. Yeah, like you said, he's been good in ARCA, he's been good in the lower series, and he impressed in that first truck start. I thought he did a really good job. I think there was a number of drivers. We saw Zane Smith get a top 5. He's not related to Chandler, is he? They just both happen to be Smith. Yeah, there's a lot of Smiths in the world. I didn't think so, but yeah, you know, he ran well, top 5 in Xfinity. Harrison Burton had top 5s in both the Xfinity and the truck race this weekend, so I think that should be noted. I think there's a lot of good young drivers in those races, and I think Chandler Smith definitely. The fact that he's 16 and doing what he's doing, people are going to take note for sure.
Absolutely, Jarrett.
yeah, I think anytime anyone that young shows promise, you know, no matter what level for the most part it is, I think that people should take notice. And I think that you know, if he keeps this up in the coming years, he's definitely going to be in top equipment. He's going to be one of those next rising stars, and I especially with a lot of those guys and coming up. And it's just I like that you can see now that there's so many of these talented drivers. All that the question is, I think at this point now is, well, 2 questions is, one, can they keep up the performance as they move up? That's always a question. And nowadays, are there the seats open? So,
yeah, I think that's the major concern is like, you know, who's available and stuff. And also you have to beware of pay drivers too, who might not be as good. So you have to beware of those. Yes, gotta beware of those.
Beware the Michael Annettes of the world.
I mean, Annette, he is, you know, having a good year by his standards. So I mean, it's not all bad, I guess. The Slap Shoes, what do you think of the kid?
Chandler Smith, I mean, he kind of came out of nowhere for me. I knew he was doing all right in ARCA, and I just never really paid him much attention. I was like, wow, a 16-year-old won pole at Iowa with Kyle Busch Motorsports equipment in the same truck that Greg Biffle drove. I mean, those guys over at KBM, they're in the hot seat now. It's like, this equipment can perform. Like, you just got to go out there and you got to want it and got to go after it. I mean, this kid's still in high school. Like, what's your excuse? The other guy was almost 50 and he hasn't driven a race car in 3 years. What's your excuse? So the big problem is we got like so many guys that show so much talent. Chandler Smith, Zane Smith impressed. Cole Custer, you know, he's the other guy with Stewart-Haas that would be battling with Christopher Bell if he came over to Stewart-Haas to move up to the Cup Series. And the problem is we just have like this bottleneck of talent. Whereas back in the day, it wasn't really a problem because there were so many cars. Like, you could race for a lower mid-pack team for the first 2 years of your
but it's so squeezed in now. Like,
yeah, and now there's so few teams that, you know, your options are very, very limited. And they're so limited and you got so little time to work with that you don't want to waste 1 or 2 years of your career driving for Front Row Motorsports or something like that.
Right. Absolutely. And some other prospects I want to bring up too. You mentioned Harrison Burton and Todd Gilliland. Do you think do you think fans are too quick to give up on them? And do you, and if so, does that mostly have to do with their team owner calling them out?
I think the reason people are skeptical of both Harrison Burton and Todd Gilliland, I think they're both still really young. I know Harrison's 18. I want to say is Todd Gilliland 19. I'm not sure exactly their age, but they're both teenagers. They're both still young. So I think it's definitely too early to write them off as if like, oh, they're never going to get to the Cup Series. They're just going to be average Xfinity and truck drivers forever. I think it's too early to say that. I think the reason people do dismiss them is because of their last names. Gilliland and Burton, people assume they're given all their opportunities because they're dads. And I'm sure that they definitely have gotten advantages. They've gotten opportunities probably that other drivers maybe weren't able to because of that connection. But I'm not sold that either of them are going to be championship contenders. I think Harrison Burton's a little closer in my opinion. He's made some Xfinity starts this year, and I think he's made 2 Xfinity starts, and he has a 10th and a 5th, or a 10th and like a 3rd place finish or 4th place finish. I think that's pretty good in Joe Gibbs equipment. That's about where you're supposed to be. So I'm not going to sit here and give up on both of them just yet, but I do think Kyle Busch calling him out. While I don't love publicly calling your own teammates out, I'm not a big fan of that. It does light a fire into these guys, and it's really this is their year to prove something. And they've been kind of slow to do it this year, but maybe we've seen, maybe they can start to pick things up. I think it's still too early to give up on them completely.
I'm kind of in the same boat there with you, especially with the Harrison Burton. But I think part of it too is, a lot of drivers have proven in the past they're better in certain series than others. Maybe the trucks aren't the right driving style for them. I mean, you see that. You said Harrison Burton has made 2 starts, and it was like, what'd you say, a 3rd and a 10th?
Yep.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it shows like he has talent. Going up to the Xfinity Series and running in the top 10, even if it's a JGR car in your first few starts, that's a lot tougher competition, in my opinion, than the Truck Series is. So maybe it's not his driving style. I mean, you look at Jimmy Johnson, how he ran in the Xfinity Series before going to Cup. If you just looked at those Xfinity stats, you would not think 7-time champion. You look at, even if you want to go way down the line of the ladder. Look at how Dale Jr. performed in late models. He started, I think, like 150 races and landed 3 wins. And he's came up and was an Xfinity champion and Daytona 500 champion. Won, I think, a numerous amount of races. He's in the top 30 all time, or top 30, 40 all time win list. So I think they are giving up on him too early, and I think it completely has to do with 1, their last names, and 2, the fact that Kyle Busch is a ruthless owner, and he will if somebody like a 50-year-old comes in and wins, or a 16-year-old comes in and starts wiping the floor with you, then I can understand why people immediately give up on him. But they're not terrible, especially Harrison Burton, not a terrible driver. I think they need a little more of a shot for now, but that's just my opinion.
Also, another thing I want to bring up too, since we have Slap here, in that Martin Truex Jr. Slap did, he mentioned a very good point. The NASCAR Xfinity Series, it's marketed as this as this development series nowadays. But if you actually look at the stats, not many go on to win championships. Is that right?
Yeah, from 1990 to 2004, when Truex won his first Xfinity Series title, then the Busch Series. It was like kind of a coin toss about whether or not you were actually going to be decent in the Cup Series. Your odds of getting double-digit wins was like 1 in 3. So it's the stats don't really bear that out, and I think it really. Today, I think it's worse because the way that we bring up young drivers, we bring them up at such a young age now, where guys are, you're driving a limited late model by the time you're 14. Now you're in a late model stock by the time you're 16. Now you're 17, 18, you're driving a super late model. Okay, now you're in K&N East. Okay, now you're in Truck Series. And you're expected to be in Cup by the time you're 21. You have never adjusted to anything yet. Like, back in the day, Alan Kulwicki, Mark Martin, they were driving in the ASA series for like 5-6 years and mastering that, and then they would move up.
Mm-hmm.
It was not expected that you would move up to the Cup Series until you were at least approaching 30. And so I think it's hard for these guys with all this raw talent to really channel that into being good at the Cup Series or being good at any one discipline, because they keep constantly changing cars, keep constantly changing seasons, and we expect the world out of them. And every once in a while you get like a Kyle Larson that is really good at all of them, or a Christopher Bell that looks really good in all of them. But for guys like Todd Gillen or Harrison Burton, who knows? Maybe once they get all that horsepower, they get that new aero package in the Cup Series, like that's their thing, and they just dominate. But I just don't like the way that we bring guys up at such a young age and just move them up. You know, you do one series 1 year, and then the next series you're doing something completely different.
And you know, that's very indicative of I feel like that's indicative of some of the superstars we have in the Cup Series now. You look at Kyle Busch. I mean, he was, you know, winning races in the Busch Series when he was like, you know, when he was like, you know, 18, 19 years old. And then, you know, you get these other prospects and expect them to do, you know, similar things, and then most of the time,
yeah, Kyle Busch is the exception. He's not the rule.
Yeah.
You know, Mark Martin would never, at age 16, 19, he was not Kyle Busch. You would have, by today's standards, at any of those guys who were winners back in the 90s or the 80s, you'd be like, you know, this guy's, you know, used up goods. He's no good by age 21 or 22.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And we see that most obviously when you compare drivers in the late 90s, early 2000s. The moment they got into the Cup Series in their mid to late 20s, like Tony Stewart or Dale Jr. or Matt Kenseth, they immediately came in and started winning races. And we just look at today's young crop of drivers, even when they get to the Cup Series. Took Chase Elliott 3 years to win, took Eric Jones a year and a half. Suarez still hasn't won. Byron still hasn't won. Larson took him a couple of years to finally win. You know, they're coming up and they don't have the same experience. I think we've seen. It's all started because teams are wanting to cut costs and all that, and there's people retiring. It's just some of it's just bad timing. But now it's like, I think you're right. It's putting an unnecessary strain on these drivers, and I think it's a good point you make there that a lot of these young guys, since they're only spending a year, sometimes not even a full year in each series before they move up, they're really never able to establish any roots anywhere. They're just kind of constantly bouncing the type of cars, the field, the talent, the skills they have to learn. They're never able to sit there and master one type of skill before they go step in and have to learn something completely new. It's a bunch of dipping their toes in. It's like a buffet where you just get a little bit here and there, but you're not sitting down at the restaurant and taking it all in and getting the full main course. I think
it's like a starter platter instead of like an entree.
Yeah, that was a really weird analogy I just made, but I guess it works.
I mean, it works, and now I'm hungry, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point.
And looking at some of these younger drivers too, there's a few things I think about it with it, like how long term is this going to affect the sport? You know, like if everyone keeps having to be brought in younger and younger and younger, and we're looking at people, you know, brought into Cup someday as a norm at 19 or 20, you know, or 18, how I guess the learning curve and the fact that how many competitive drivers, even if they're in good cars, even if some of these younger guys in good cars, they're gonna have that learning curve, and if they're not given a chance, like it's just gonna give them more difficult. And you know, I saw a comment on my video I made a few weeks ago about, you know, NASCAR's youth movement, and it seemed like between 2007 and 2014, it was like there was just a lost generation, where it's like nobody really was that remarkable coming up, with the exception of like I'd say Brad Keselowski and Joey Logano for sure. But it's like you look, there wasn't that huge influx of younger drivers. And I think that has a bit to do with it, that with that sort of dried up youth there, I guess, you know, there wasn't as many people coming in. Now these teams are even more desperate to replace these guys, because as younger guys are starting to come up, is when these huge stars like Jeff Gordon, Tony Stewart, Dale Jr., soon to be Jimmy Johnson are retiring, Matt Kenseth, you know, all these guys are retiring now. And so it sort of forces the team's hands, you know. And so I'm kind of wondering, are we just going to see it where like every 5 to 10 years we have a bunch of young people come up and then nobody for a while because there just aren't the rides because of money or whatever reason? There's a lot that, you know, while there is a good future in store with NASCAR, with these younger drivers, you know, we talk, like, it seems like a weekly basis we talk about Haley Deegan, and you look at Derek Cross, you know, and all of these different guys. There is also that question of like, will the rides be there? And when they are they going to be ready for them, I guess.
Pretty soon, at this rate, we'll have 10-year-olds in the Cup Series. At this rate, it's looking like. So, really quick super chat. Speaking of Haley Deegan, Carl Singleton with the $2 super chat. It's a two-parter. Haley Deegan should replace Kyle Busch, and then if you scroll down, another $2 super chat, part 2, when he retires.
Okay.
Thanks for making that.
Yeah.
That's a while down the road, though.
Yeah, not right now, obviously. I mean, that'd be pretty cool. A Monster Energy Cup Series paint scheme looked pretty good. We already see a sneak preview of that in the Xfinity Series with the Spar or however you say that.
Really quick, back with the youth movement deal. DC Comics Racing was saying, I agree to a large extent with this, is that the youth movement from 07 to 13 is non-existent because for the most part it was replaced with an open wheel movement and more of a and just different drivers coming in. And that, I think that had such a huge effect on the way that we're doing it now, because we were going towards this before then. We were going towards younger and younger drivers, but 19, 20 years old with guys coming in Cup, it's just tough. It's a hard deal, but at this point, it's kind of almost what the teams need to survive, and the drivers, I think, have to adjust to it, because I don't think it's changing anytime soon.
Oh, by the way, guys, the 10-year-olds being the Cup Series is a joke. I see if you on the chat. Jesus Christ, it's a joke.
And just to add in what Jared was saying, I think the biggest problem with some of these young guys is they haven't proven themselves, but they got these good rides, and I hate to say it, but money's got a lot to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And with cost rising and sponsorships drying up, if a big name guy like Harrison Burton or Todd Gilliland, who's got some money behind him, got a legacy behind him, that's an attractive option if you're a team owner, even if they don't get the results, and that can kind of hurt guys who actually are trying to make their way up through merit rather than money or connections or anything like that. And I've seen that at Greenville Pickens. I've seen a lot of guys come up through there and start winning races, and I knew that they're there because of dad's money. I saw Carson Quapple would come out, and his dad's Travis Quapple. He'd come out there and he'd just dominate. And I'm just like, that's not the way it used to get done. But you see the end result where we have like this kind of bottleneck of talent. We don't know who's really that good because they're all so young and all that. And it's just, I don't think this is sustainable.
Yeah,
is the big problem.
And speaking of that as well, back in the 90s, that was IndyCar's business model. So like, oh, you have to have millions of dollars and stuff to get in, and to race and stuff. While in NASCAR's heyday, you got there just on merit, usually most of the time.
Yeah.
But like nowadays, I feel like it's reversed now, and I feel like that has a lot to do with NASCAR's business model being way behind IndyCar's.
Mm-hmm. It's the whole, in NASCAR, what sets it apart from other sports is you're only as good as your equipment, and it's kind of hard, in basketball and football, everyone's literally on an equal playing field, and you can really tell who's the most talented. In NASCAR, equipment matters, and if you're a great driver, you can only do so much with a Starcom car. If you're a bad driver, you're gonna still run 10th in Joe Gibbs racing equipment, so it makes it really tough to judge.
And also, I just want to point out too, I see DC Commons Racing in the chat saying like we have to look at this at it this way. Not every young prospect is going to be a superstar. Absolutely, I like honestly out of the prospects we have now, the only ones I really seeing us see as future superstars are Haley Deegan, Christopher Bell, and if he's lucky, Chandler Smith. Like I don't really see that many superstars, and maybe some other fans are different in that regards and stuff. So I guess
I could see Derek Cross. I could see him definitely coming up and doing really well. I'm telling you, he gets so overlooked. Mm-hmm. That's sort of the problem with racing against Haley Deegan, is he gets so overlooked. But I mean, he is. I think he's proved himself. But that's I guess up for debate with everybody else too.
Right.
Yeah. He's proved that he should get a truck ride at some point. That's what he's proved to me so far. I mean,
he's performed well in the truck series too, by the way.
Yeah, that's I should have clarified. That's what I meant.
Yeah, I got you.
Right. All right, so enough of prospects. Let's get back to some Cup Series guys. So Jimmy Johnson had an article released in the San Francisco Chronicle earlier this week, basically saying him and Knaus's relationship began to have cracks as far as 2015. So maybe that has something to do with their breakup. But I mean, during that time, they were still running pretty good. 2015 was a good season. 2016 won a seventh and so far final Cup Series championship. 2017 was a bit of an off year, but they were still winning races. And then 2018, by his standards, it came crashing down. So I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on this?
Well, according to Chad Knaus, like they had cracks in the relationship back in like 2004, 2005. You know, the famous story of they were so mad at each other after they came up short one season that Rick Hendrick had to sit them down in his office, brought out some cookies and some milk, and said, "If you're going to act like children, I'm going to treat you like children."
I think it was 2005, maybe. I remember.
Yeah, I think it was 2005. It was the year before he won his first championship, and so they had a history of going at each other, and I think they had such a long period of good times that they just kind of put their differences aside. And then when things started to fall off a little bit after 2013, I think that's when they started going at each other again.
But don't you think this is a bit overblown? Because no relationship is perfect. Every relationship has cracks.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So, I mean, that like animosity, if you want to call it that, or just creative differences has always been there. I just think it flared back up in 2015.
Yeah, and it probably flared back up, 2018 as well, when they weren't running nowhere near as advertised as well. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, this in no way surprised me as well, just because, I mean, you hear Jimmy Johnson, in interviews before, he's said, it's like, yeah, we don't really even talk outside of just racing. Like, we really don't have that much in common kind of thing. He insinuated that, I should say. But he also had said they don't really hang out as much as, like, you look at other crew chiefs in the past. You look at a lot of these crew chiefs, and it seems like they're good friends with their drivers. And with Knaus and Johnson, there was always that little bit of fighting and back and forth, and you could tell it was almost like, we're not the craziest about each other away from work, but at work we can really work together, kind of thing. But also, I mean, you look at the performance, and even his 2016 season, it still was trending down. It's just with this format, he was able to hit it at the right time. And then 2017 and 18, it doesn't surprise me at all. And I think it doesn't surprise me at all. And I don't think other fans should really be too surprised as well. But that's my opinion. They, like we were saying before, they had the infighting in 2005. But winning will cover up a lot of problems. So
right.
Yeah.
And also back to Jarrett's point about them not necessarily being the best of friends off the racetrack, not having any sort of animosity in that sense, but just not really hanging out. I mean, look at other sports. Michael Jordan wasn't really best friends with his teammates and still won six championships.
Plenty of Super Bowl winning NFL teams where they had coaches and quarterbacks and receivers who all just hated each other, but they went on dynasties anyway.
Well, not necessarily hating each other, but just like not necessarily hanging out off the field or off the track and that sort of thing. And even in baseball. What was it? The Mets, Doc Gooden and Darrell Strawberry. They weren't necessarily, very, all that close and stuff. But I mean, hell, they still, won a World Series back in the day. So, Eric, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, just Kobe and Shaq won championships with the Lakers. So yeah, I think it told me that. It really confirmed to me that Jimmy Johnson is the closest thing to, the Michael Jordan of NASCAR we've seen in the modern era, because that's kind of, you look at greats in any sport, and a lot of times they have to have kind of an obsessive mentality. They're obsessed with being the best. And I think, I'm not saying other drivers in NASCAR are content with being mediocre, but I don't think many of them, at least, are quite as devoted as Jimmy Johnson and Chad Knaus.
Some are just happy to be
for
there.
Many years. Yeah. I think a little bit of that, but I think that's what this really says to me is they found out very early on in their careers how good they could be. They won races out of the box, and they won a championship in their, fifth year together, something like that. And then, of course, went on to win 5 more in a row. And so very early on, they knew what their best was, and their best was arguably all-time best. And so I think when you get to 2015, where there was kind of an up-and-down season, 2016, where they still won the title because they're that good, it was still kind of an up-and-down season. And then 2017, 2018, more struggles. I just think they still made the playoffs in 2018. They still contended for wins. They didn't win any, but you could definitely tell, I think, they knew very early on where their best was. And I think, as with any great in any sport, the moment you slip a little bit, it can be really hard to come to grips with that. And I think the moment, they started to slip in 2017 or 2018, I think they immediately knew. They looked around, what needs to change? Something needs to change. And I think what this told me also is I was interested. I thought maybe the decision came from Rick Hendricks saying, hey, Jimmy and Chad, you guys are great, but we got William Byron, Kevin Mendering. Like, you guys aren't going to be here forever. How about Chad, you go over here to Byron, Jimmy, you go over here with Mendering, and you guys kind of mentor them for a couple of years. And then when you guys retire, we can team them up and form a super team. I honestly thought maybe it was Rick Hendrick coming to them saying, like, hey, performance hasn't been that good, let's do this. But no, this sounds to me like it was more instigated by Jimmy and Chad. And I thought that was the most interesting part. But yeah, like you guys said, no secret that they always had kind of not necessarily a rocky relationship, but a purely business relationship that sometimes hit bumps, but more often than not, obviously they won. And so it was pretty good.
I'm glad you made the Jordan comparison. I'll make my own, I guess you could say, Knaus and Johnson, they were, the Chicago Bulls of NASCAR and stuff, winning 6, 7 championships and stuff. And now, I guess you can compare Johnson and Mendering's, their performance to when Jordan was on the Wizards, I guess you could say. Decent, but obviously never the same,
That's good. That's good.
No one will ever remember it, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, Johnson and Knaus, look at all of their accomplishments. What about him and Mendering? Oh, we don't talk about that.
It's great. It's great that Ally came on and sponsored him for these next 2 years, but it's kind of going to be, nobody's going to remember. When they think Jimmy Johnson in 10 years, it's all going to be lows. Nobody's going to talk about the Ally years.
Yeah.
Right. Well, unless he, somehow comes out of nowhere and wins a championship.
Unless he can pull a Harry Gant and start winning a whole bunch of races in his 50s.
Yeah. Just pull that mess. Right. So moving on, Regan Smith, it was announced today, he will be making 2 Xfinity Series starts, once again with Junior Motorsports. He's back with the team. The races were, I think one of them was Road America. I'll have to pull it up again really quick.
Yeah, it's Mid Ohio and Road America.
Right. So 2 road course races. He's a pretty good road course racer. Do you guys see him winning one of those 2?
Definitely has a shot. But I'm not. I don't know. It's too far off. I'm maybe. I guess.
Maybe just because there is such a lack of experience in the Xfinity Series as it is, and especially when it comes to road courses. I think that's what's interesting, that Dale Jr., there's only a few road courses on the schedule, and Junior's opted to put a veteran in the car rather than he's got young guys, prospects for pretty much every other race. But for the road courses, he's like, nah, let's let an experienced guy maybe test the waters on those.
Yeah. Let's let Mr. Replacement have at it and see what he can do.
No, I didn't catch it or not, but was that the whole getting the band back together? Because that's a real letdown, in my opinion, if that's the case. Like, no offense to Regan Smith, but that's a letdown in my, I was sitting there, having fantasies about, the Uries being on the box and Darlington.
Yeah. That'd be awesome. Oh, one can dream, right? So moving on now. So, like I said earlier in the show, this is the 16th race of the season this weekend at Sonoma, so we're pretty close to the halfway point of the 2019 season. And looking at the points, let me go over the playoff standings right now. So right now, Joey Logano is the points leader, followed by Kyle Busch, Brad Keselowski. Oh wait, hold on. Let me read the playoff version, not the consistent points version. All right. So yeah, Kyle Busch, Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski, Truex Jr., Denny Hamlin. That's your top 5. Rounding out the top 10, Chase Elliott, Kevin Harvick, Ryan Blaney, Kurt Busch, and Kyle Larson has snuck back inside the top 10. So he's making having a comeback season. And then the final spots are filled by Alex Bowman, Clint Boyer, Daniel Suarez, Eric Almirola, Jimmy Johnson, and William Byron. So, panel, let me ask you guys this. So who are, in your opinions, who are the biggest surprises and disappointments so far in 2019? Eric, you start.
All right, biggest surprise. Where'd you say William Byron is? He's still in the top 16, right? He's
14th. He's 16th, and from the looks of it, he's... Okay, that's weird. It's saying he's... Okay, hold on. No, I think... the app is weird. It's saying Jimmy Johnson's 15th and 3 points to the good.
I have racing reference up.
Okay.
Byron is 14th, Jimmy Johnson 16th.
Okay,
Yeah, I was gonna
that's
say
what it says in the app. I don't. That's weird.
Byron's been a surprise for me in a positive way. I thought Knaus would help that team a little bit, but he went from running like 22nd last year to now he's looking like he's 14th. He's been better than Johnson more often than not. So and he's figured out Friday and Saturday. He's qualified. Does he have 2 poles this year? I know he has one. I don't know. He starts up front a lot. That's all I know. And now they're starting to figure out how to put together a full race on Sunday. So I would definitely say Byron's a big surprise.
He has 3 poles.
3?
Yeah. Wow.
I thought he had maybe 2. Goodness me. Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking in Daytona, Charlotte, and Pocono. He had 2 in a row with Charlotte
That's
and Pocono.
right. Wow.
Yeah, caught me sleeping.
Not bad.
Yeah, so that's been a surprise to me. Although I would also say as a negative surprise is Austin Dillon. I think is he still outside the top 20? I really thought he, and a few weeks ago, like a month and a half ago, he was like 13th or 14th, and I was like, that's where I thought he'd be. That's about what I thought from Austin Dillon. Good job, but man, he's just faded. I don't know. I think they've had a couple bad finishes. I'd have to go back and look. I'm sure they weren't all necessarily of their own doing, but I thought he would take a big step forward this year and really look like a top 15 contender consistently, and they've kind of not maintained that. So he's been kind of a disappointment for me.
Yeah, I'm going to say my biggest surprise this year, in a positive way, from how bad this car was a year ago, in my opinion, it has to be Ryan Newman. If you told me at any point in the last really 5 years that halfway through the season, Ryan Newman was going to be right behind Jimmy Johnson, I wouldn't have believed you, no matter where Johnson was in the field, if it was as long as it was above 20th. He is 3 points behind Jimmy Johnson right now, which I just find insane, knowing how that 6 car is not good. Like I think that Ryan Newman is way outperforming the car he's in, and you look at his teammate Ricky Stenhouse. Stenhouse right now, if I'm doing my math right, is 35 points behind Newman.
Yeah,
and in 20th, like not performing whatsoever. On top of Newman, I'd also say that Alex Bowman's been a welcome surprise. Definitely improved off last year, especially that string of second place finishes. If I had to go with disappointment, just off of relative performance in the past few years, I guess you'd have to say Kevin Harvick. You know, and that's not to say that he's bad by any means, but it's a disappointing compared to how he has been. So you know, if I guess if you just want to look at it in that term, but yeah, that's my big surprise in the both positive and negative light.
Slap.
Biggest disappointment would definitely have to be Kyle Larson. I mean, I thought he'd just go out there and I thought he would figure out this Camaro and go out there and light everything up, and that just didn't happen. But speaking of Camaro's, biggest surprise would be Alex Bowman. I never thought Alex Bowman would amount to anything when he got the 88 ride. I really didn't. I was just like, well, they're getting him because he's cheap. You know, they don't have to pay him a whole lot of money. But then he goes out there and he gets like 3 second place finishes in a row, and I'm like, okay, now he's legit. All right. And so I think he's going to punch his ticket at some point. I think that first one's going to find him at some point this year. And what you said about Ryan Newman, like Ryan Newman has way outperformed what I thought Roush Racing was capable of at this point. And I think he could win at some point this year. It might have to be a mile and a half with the way that they've been racing in these big, huge packs with like these kind of, we saw it in the 600 where it was kind of like a demolition derby thing. You saw these guys getting all these like bent up fenders and everything. Maybe one of those goes the right way for him and he ends up getting that first win and punches his ticket at some point.
Right. I'd say the biggest surprise for me by far, Kurt Busch. I was very disrespectful to that one team at the very beginning of the season. I'm like, oh man, Kurt Busch, why do you have to go here? This team is bad. It's not going to work. Currently ahead of his teammate Kyle Larson. So, off to a very good start. And I think he's got something for them this weekend at Sonoma as well. And then for my disappointment, I gotta say Kyle Larson. Even though he is top 10 right now, he just got inside the top 10. So I'm going off of most of the season. He's just been very up and down. 1 week he wrecks, the next, he wins the All-Star race, and then is looking very consistent. And then all of a sudden he's wrecking again. So.
He's 15th right now. I definitely thought he'd be higher than that.
Wait. Where's Kyle Larson right now?
15th.
You see, I'm sorry. So like these standings I have on the NASCAR app, let this be.
Well, that's your biggest
lesson
problem
learned.
right
Yeah,
there.
the
Is
NASCAR app.
you're actually looking at the NASCAR
I use
app.
the NASCAR app. That is the only time I will ever use that. So Jared, can you read off the point standings, please, for me, please?
Yeah, I think this is a lesson to everybody. Don't use anything that NASCAR puts online because they're always wrong.
Oh my gosh, so awful.
So the actual playoff grid right now is Kyle Busch has 4 wins, Brad Keselowski and Truex have 3, Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin with 2, and then Chase Elliott has 1 win. Kevin Harvick is 7th on the grid, 8th is Kurt Busch, 9th Ryan Blaney, 10th Alex Bowman, 11th Eric Almirola, Quint Boyer 12th, Daniel Suarez 13th, 14th is William Byron, 15th Kyle Larson, and Jimmy Johnson is 16th, 3 points in the playoffs. I almost said Chase.
Damn it, NASCAR app! You're making me look stupid here. Well, I'm good at that myself.
Nah, don't worry,
don't worry.
They should get that right.
So, yeah, but yeah, Kyle Larson. Now that it's confirmed, he's outside of the top 10, 15th right now, and barely inside the playoffs. Definitely, without a doubt, the biggest disappointment in my opinion. An hour and 30 minutes in, let's take a look. We have 240 people watching and only 186 likes. Make sure to click the like button, and thank you guys for tuning in, staying for most of the stream. We've had a blast here. I'm glad to have S1apSh0es on here as well. Jared, do you want to give us a rundown, man, or you don't have anything?
We pretty much got most of it. I mean, I didn't get the name down before the show, but Corbin Forrester's team shut down. So
that's right. Yeah,
make of that what you will. But Kamikaze put up a really good point in his video that he sort of knew this was going to happen once he put basically all caution to the wind on Twitter. So and we've hit 203 likes. Thank you all so much.
Thank y'all.
So yeah. I guess that's one of the stories there that we can talk about a little bit if we want to.
Wait, hold on.
And go ahead and read that one, Darren.
I'm not. Oh, wait, hold on. All right, so thank you, Carl.
You're gonna get demonetized in a heartbeat here.
The like button ain't a. Oh, you guys can read. No, I'm not Thank you.
Go ask your parents if you don't understand.
Yeah, go ask your parents that. I ain't say nothing. That was just a super chat. So.
But don't tell them where you saw it, because then they won't let you watch us anymore.
Oh, it's on my channel too. Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah, don't be going there.
You're gonna get age gated so hard.
Yeah, the name's already a bit much as is, but don't need that. So. All right, so
All Out Motorsports, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, All Out Motorsports. And some people were saying like, oh, this is because of the Twitter thing. It has nothing to do. This has probably been planned, and this was going to happen months in advance. So it's not all of a sudden, happening after some BS on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is there anything else, or is that it, basically?
Racing wise, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, we touched on about.
What about otherwise?
Oh, I guess one thing I did want to get on really quick before picks is our guest Slap. Man, you gave us a little bit of the rundown beforehand, but man, you have exploded in the last few months. So I guess just wherever you'd want to start off with talking on that.
Well, this stuff behind me, these are all anime Blu-rays and DVDs, and that was like one of my first passions. I wanted to start doing that on YouTube. I've been a NASCAR fan since I was a little kid, obviously, but anime was one thing I wanted to start YouTubing, and I thought I could find my niche there. And did that for 2 years, got like 400 subs, and that was it. And I started up a little side project called Slaptastic Motorsports. Put up one video that I was kind of a passion project of mine, the worst race ever, the 1969 Talladega 500. I put that up the week of the Talladega race in October of last year and just let it sit there. I checked back on it in January. It's got 800 views. I got 4 subs. I'm like, all right, cool. Checked back on it in mid-March, and it has 88,000 views, and I've got 900 subs. And I have doubled what I've done on that anime channel in just a few months. So I was like, all right, I found my niche. This is it. So I had put up the Blood on the Asphalt trailer and hadn't even really wrote the script all the way out and didn't just let it sit there. And I had no intention of doing Blood on the Asphalt really at all. And then that channel blew up, and I was like, well, now I got to do it. So I had some other NASCAR videos that I'd made for like a 31 videos in 31 days challenge that I had on that channel. Decided to port those over to the NASCAR channel, and everything just started taking off. And just being on YouTube for 2 years and not really doing anything with that anime channel, it really taught me how to edit, how to tell a compelling narrative, how to get your audio right, how to use Audacity, how to use a Premiere Pro and all that. And so when the NASCAR channel took off, I was prepared with how to make good content, and I knew what I wanted to do. And I had all these ideas in my head, and it was just a matter of, all right, sit down, put down the audio, edit the video, and upload, and yeah, the rest is history.
Certainly got to put in the time and effort too. Like, I mean, your content is like, it's right up there again with SB Nation and stuff. It's something I've never seen before in the NASCAR YouTube community, man. Definitely one of a kind, for sure.
Yeah, definitely found my niche there. I didn't think I was doing anything too special at the time, but then that video took off, and everybody was like, "You got to do more. You got to do more. Why haven't you uploaded anything in 3 months now?" And I was like, all right, I got a few ideas. Let me throw them out there and see if people like them. And sure enough, they did.
So really quick, I got this. Runnings Racing sent me this DM. By the way, so this is just a really quick PSA. From 704 Games, it says, another reminder: if you're still wanting to use the ticket voucher you got when you purchased NASCAR Heat 3, those need to be redeemed by June 23rd. So you got a very short time to.
Yeah, 4 days.
Tickets. Yep, you got 4 days to purchase those tickets. So.
You know it.
All right.
Yeah, till Sunday.
Yep. All
No,
right.
but yeah, that's really cool to see how much your channel has grown and just so fast. Because
Yeah.
You can never have too much good NASCAR content out there. And I think it's fun to watch for me personally, but it's also, I can imagine it's got to be so much fun for especially newer fans that are getting into NASCAR. You got to imagine a lot of them are younger fans. They're very accustomed to YouTube, going online, finding content, and kind of finding some of your stuff with a lot of history and everything, and kind of really building their own, building the picture of what this sport is, and helping kind of inform them, but also in an entertaining way. I think that's really important. That's why I do YouTube videos still, and I think that's why that's one of the best things it has to offer. So that's really cool.
I was blown away by how many comments I got from people who were like, "Hey, I'm from Australia, I'm from the UK, or I'm from Canada. I've never watched NASCAR, but now I want to. How do I do it?" And I'm like, awesome. Try TSN, or I don't know what you got over there, but it's on Fox Sports over here. You can go to NASCAR Reddit and you can stream it and stuff. And, somebody was like, I'm from Kansas, and how do I get to Kansas Speedway? I'm like, well, it's over here, and I was just blown away by how many people who said that I'm not interested in NASCAR, but you tell such a compelling narrative that I want to check this out. How do I check this out? How do I get my toes wet here? Yeah. And I'm like, holy crap, I'm making new fans here. I'm reeling them back in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome.
Really quick, this super chat is for you. Well, I get the money, but it's for you. Carl Singleton, thanks for another $2 super chat. I think that's like the 5th or 6th one tonight. So he's on a roll. His question is for Slap. Who is Slap's favorite driver?
All time or current? Let's just do both, I guess.
Do both, yeah. Do both.
Yeah, Mark Martin, all time. That was my guy. That was I followed him until he finally called it quits. I started really paying attention to the sport. I kind of took a hiatus after Dale Earnhardt Sr. died, because I was just kind of blindsided. I didn't really know what to think about it. But in 2005, I heard it was Mark Martin's supposedly his last season, and he decided to really pay attention during the 2005 season to see my favorite driver out. And I just always liked the way he raced. And my mom, anytime I was misbehaving, she would just say, like, is that something Mark Martin would do? And I was like, no. And so, but current driver would be Brad Keselowski. I watched him when he was coming up through USAR Hooters Pro Cup Series. When I'd come back home from high school, and I'd have the race would be on Speed TV on a Wednesday, and I'd have it on the DVR, and I'd watch it. I'd watch Brad Keselowski and Trevor Bayne and Joey Logano all battle it out in that series. And I always thought, he's a really good driver, but he'll never get his chance, and that's sad. And then he got his chance, and he ended up being a champion. So I've followed him ever since.
Absolutely. But damn, you said high school. What year did you graduate?
2008.
Damn, you're old. Holy crap.
Damn, I got the baby face. I still get carded everywhere I go.
Yeah. Damn, man. That was in 5th grade. Holy crap. You said back in high school. Well, I'm just saying.
To think about how bad my dad feels, I had to break it to him. Because I told him about my YouTube channel. He was like, my baby boy, man, he's getting famous. He's making it. And I'm like, Dad, I'm almost 30 now. He's like, dang, don't tell me that. Right. Because I can deal with being 50 something, but I can't deal with you being 30.
Really quick, Flying Gator, thanks for the super chat, man. He says this is a family friendly area. Yeah, this was after the Carl Singleton super chat before the last one and stuff. So,
and
yeah,
then you see the recent,
Oh wait, he has another one. Okay, thanks once again for the super chat, Flying Gator.
Reference to the other night.
Yeah, if you watch, if you're not subscribed to Black Lives Matter Gaming, go subscribe now. I'm closing in on 1,000 subscribers. Yeah, Darren, can we hear some Viva Fire? If you watch the stream on Monday, you'll get the reference.
Yeah, speaking of Mark Martin, Viva Viagra, yeah.
Also, Monday Morning Racer, thanks for the $2, buddy. Slap, great videos. What's the next topic? That's a good question. What's your next video?
Spoilers.
You won't expect it. I'll just say that.
Oh, come on. Just give us a hint. Give us a hint, man.
It's about an old track that I want us to go back to.
Oh, okay.
Ooh, nice timing.
There's a billion of those, so it's like a billion of those, it seems.
Yeah, it really narrows it down, right?
Yeah. All right, so
I can't wait.
All right, yeah, can't wait, man. And if you're not subscribed to Slap Shoes, go subscribe to him. He's closing in on 10,000 subs. Just to put it in perspective, it took me a year and a half to reach 10K, and it's taken this guy like 2 days. So. It feels like so.
Yeah, basically since January. In January, I had 4 subs, and so now I've got like 9,500 something.
Yeah, definitely a huge inspiration on NASCAR YouTube. It can turn around like that if you work hard enough and if you put out the.
And I was about ready to quit YouTube. I was so burnt out on putting up videos about anime and keeping up with that scene because it changes like every few months. And I was just like, man, I'm never going to get ahead in this, so why don't I just give up? And then I checked out the NASCAR channel. I was like, holy crap. I'm almost monetized now. So I decided to put all my full attention over there, and it blew up.
Oh, that's good to hear. Thank God you didn't quit, man, because your content is phenomenal and stuff. It's awesome. Right.
It's the only one I can honestly say where it literally brings together NASCAR YouTube, NASCAR Twitter, and NASCAR Reddit, and that is
NASCAR
an accomplishment.
Reddit loves you. They love you, man. Like some of them love me and Jared. But like you, I never hear any. I never read anything bad about you.
Yeah, because I used to post on the Reddit anime board, and people there are ruthless. They're ruthless, and people would eviscerate my stuff, and I was like, man, I don't know if I'm cut out for this, but I got my little clan of subs. They like me. And then people started posting my stuff to Reddit, and I saw it on Reddit. I was like, oh God, no. And then I saw the comments, and all of them were positive. I was like, yes.
Oh man, that's so rare. Like I don't think we're the YouTube community is ever gonna see anything like that. All right, so Fiasco with the $2 super chat. Thanks, man. Keep it up, guys. This is all good stuff. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. And
thank you.
This is a good time to move on now to this Sunday. Sonoma is back on the schedule.
The carousel is back.
I got some California wine here to commemorate it.
Yes, the carousel is back, folks. I forgot how the old road course was ran, so I ran it on Project Cars 2 the other day, and it's pretty difficult on there. So this will be very entertaining. So let's get right into picks. Eric, you start us off. Who is gonna suck?
Well, this is gonna be interesting because the Roval last year was a completely new track all around. This is it's still good old Sonoma, but I would say a good maybe third of this track is pretty different that I don't think really any of these guys have raced at, especially not in NASCAR competition. So there's a lot of, you could arguably say everyone here is inexperienced. Now there's a few guys like Austin Dillon, Daniel Hemrick, one other driver I can't remember who it is now is running the K&N race the day before, so that'll help with them. That'll help get them gain some experience. But I'm picking a driver to suck, a driver who not only is young and lacks just general NASCAR road course experience, but also didn't run very well last year in this race. I think William Byron will struggle. I think he will finish easily outside the top 20. I think last year he was 25th in this race. I just don't see him doing that well. I think he's going to have a rough day.
Jarrett?
I was looking back at some previous ones, and I know with the carousel, it's going to be a little different, but I think at the same time, it's still a good amount of the track is the same track they've been going on for years now. And I was looking back at some stats, and I feel bad using this pick now after the last few minutes. But this driver has 9 starts, a top 5, and 2 top 10s, and he finished 13th last year. But he's not the greatest here in the past. Maybe it'll change with the new layout, but for now, I'm going to go actually Brad Keselowski is my suck pick. Sorry, man.
Yeah, I am going to go with. I can't pick Stenhouse because, that Darrell Waltrip scheme is pretty nice. And I don't think they're running fast and all really, except just, on the side. So no curse for them this week because of DW, so be grateful. But yeah, I'm going to go with Daniel Hemrick. I mean, he's already having a tough enough season as is. I think even in the lower series, he wasn't the best road course racer. He was pretty average, and this weekend is just gonna pile on to a long list of bad races for Hemrick this year. Slap. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
I was typing something into somebody. That's why I muted myself. I forgot. I already spoiled it a little bit earlier, but Kurt Busch, whether he drove for James Finch or Furniture Row, he always did well at Sonoma.
No. Who's gonna suck? Who's gonna suck pick?
Who's gonna suck?
Yeah,
okay.
Suck? Yeah.
I think Ryan Newman and Alex Bowman's hot streaks get broken here.
Mm-hmm.
They're good on the ovals. They've never really done that well at these sorts of tracks. So I would see their hot streaks get broken here, and probably with William Byron and company probably run sub 20.
Right on. All right, so for my underdog pick, Justin Haley, man. Justin Haley, he's someone on the entry list who I didn't expect. In his one start this season with Spire Motorsports, it was at Talladega. He was running inside the top 10 there, then unfortunately got caught up in that last lap crash. I think he'll do well this week. Eric?
See, I'm very split on this underdog pick personally. I thought about going with Jimmy Johnson because he ran really well at the Roval last year, obviously until the final corner. And I think he ran 11th at Sonoma. If I did some research before this, he ran 11th at Sonoma, and that was a down year last year for Johnson. It's a track where I think driver skill matters more than car, and definitely in this case more than aero. And I think that plays into Jimmy Johnson's hands. So I was gonna say Jimmy Johnson, but I think honestly Kurt Busch. We talked about drivers who've impressed us this year. Kurt Busch has been a surprise, a very pleasant surprise, and like you alluded to a minute ago, Slap. Yeah, he's run really well here in multiple different teams, especially back when he was with James Finch and finished 3rd or whatever it was that one year in that race. That can't go unnoticed. So yeah, I think Kurt Busch. He almost won that race at Bristol earlier this year. This might be his next best chance to get a win this season.
Jared?
So my pick has only made 2 starts here, which is why I think he's an underdog. I think he's a dark horse, whichever you might put it under. His first start here, I believe he had a 25th place finish, but last year he did finish 7th. I think that the upwards trend continues, seeing how this year for him is better than last. I'm going to go my underdog pick being Eric Jones. I think that he'll do pretty well this weekend.
Slap.
I think really like any of the guys out of the Stewart Haas stable, they've shown a little bit of speed, but out of their roster, I don't know if anybody's really been that good at Sonoma or any road courses really. Kevin Harvick won at Watkins Glen, I think. Do any of them have playoff berths yet? Clinched up?
Who?
Technically, no, I guess not.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, but for an underdog pick, I would definitely pick one of those guys. I mean, Clint Boyer or Kevin Harvick to do fairly well, to definitely be up front and maybe get a top 5 or maybe even punch their ticket. Who knows? But if we're doing final picks, I'm still leaning towards Kurt Busch.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah. So we are now in the winners picks. So Slap already said it. Kurt Busch, and I'm gonna say it as well. Kurt Busch does get his first win of the season. I feel like it's he's definitely due for it. His history at Sonoma, he won in 2011, and then even in 2012, almost pulled off one of the greatest upsets in NASCAR history with James Finch. Definitely knows how to will the car at these road courses. So he's my pick. Eric.
Yeah, I think going off what you were saying a second ago, Slap, I think Stewart-Haas Racing is going to be good in this race, especially a couple of their drivers. I think Harvick and Boyer will be really good. I think this is the race. You look at the season, the only race, I guess not counting the Daytona 500, that hasn't been won by a Gibbs or a Penske car was Talladega, which is won by Chase Elliott. That's kind of an oddball track, kind of a special track. Sonoma is also kind of an oddball special track, so I think we will finally see a non-Gibbs, non-Penske driver win again. And I'm going with a Haas driver. I'll say Clint Boyer. I think he won this race was it 2012 or 2013? I can't remember the exact year. It was one of those.
2012, yep.
2012, Clint Boyer won it. So I think Boyer gets the win this year. I think he was third last year in this race.
Nice.
I can't. I talked to Darian a little before the show about my pick, and I can't wait to see the reaction because I know I'm going to get a warm reception to it. I'm going with Chase Elliott. Now, he's had 3 starts at Sonoma, a top 5 and 2 top 10s, and he finished 4th last year. He's had a pretty good upward trend. And on top of that, he is the last Cup road course winner. I don't know if you count the Roval as much just because it's so different from everything else. But just as a pure road course, he's the last one to win on one of them. I think that he keeps it up. I think that this year he's better than he was last year. And I think that he pulls through this weekend and he shows his versatility as a driver. So if he's driving the Hooters car, I guess he gets some free pickles or something. So
Yeah,
Chase
awesome.
Elliott gets the win.
All right. And Slap Shoes, he said his pick like 10 times.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just on the Kurt Busch train.
Yeah, get on the
I like
bandwagon, man. Yeah, get on the bandwagon. All right, so almost 2 hours in. I think that'll just about wrap it up. Any final thoughts, guys? Or?
Can't
It's
wait
been a
for
fun
some
show.
road course. Can't wait for some road course racing.
And
Want
Slap.
to talk about the package finally?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, we didn't talk about the package today. That's a
Thank God.
Oh, thank you. That's a good one.
Cut the black. Cut away. We can't talk
Oh,
about it.
man. Speaking of which, the package. No, it's fine.
Shut up.
Here they're running 400 horsepower this weekend.
All right, let's get off the air. I don't want to talk any more package, even if it's about a joke.
Right. So, Slap, any final thoughts? Do you want to say where people can find you other than YouTube?
You can catch me on Twitter. You can catch me on Instagram. I know you guys are doing a big get-together at Bristol later this year. I'm not going to be able to make it. I'm flying back in from Japan that day, so I'm not going to be there. But if you want to see during that time, if you want to see some cool pictures from Japan, you can follow me on Instagram.
Yeah. Are you going there for some like anime conference or something like that?
No, I actually have a cousin. He's at Yokota Air Force Base just outside of Tokyo, and he got stationed there last year. And he was like, "Guess where I got stationed, you frickin' weeb?" I was like, "Where?" He's like, "I'm out in Japan." And I was like, "Well, now I got to make my pilgrimage out there."
That's funny.
We'll tell him the NASCAR Weekly podcast thanks him for his service, or if he's even watching, yeah, thank you for your service, man.
Yeah.
I'll relay the message to him.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was great having Slap Shoes on. I'm about to mute the rest of you guys, and we are about to end the stream. Anyways, it has been a phenomenal podcast tonight. So the end total so far, 212 likes. I appreciate that, guys. Really, I'm very thankful you guys tune into the podcast and stuff. And also, be on the lookout. This Friday, NASCAR bus, Dylan Kwasniewski, is going to be out on Friday. Might be looking into doing some collabs by then, so maybe I might have someone collab with me on that video. So be on the lookout for it. Anyways, thank you guys so much for. Oh, excuse me. Oh yes, we are on Danny's channel next week. I almost forgot about that, guys. Yes. Yeah. So tune in to Danny B Talks next week. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. This is Black Flags Matter. Catch you next time.
Green flag, green flag. I'll roll. I'll roll. He's flipping me